A menace on defense, unstoppable on offense, and
The most dangerous enemy isn't the one standing in front of you. It's the one sitting at your own table. Right now, behind closed doors, a negotiation is happening that could determine whether women's professional basketball survives the next 2 years. On one side sits the WNBA, bleeding money, desperate for solutions. On the other side, the very people building the league designed to replace it. This isn't speculation. This isn't drama. This is happening right now, and almost nobody is talking about the impossible math that makes this situation catastrophic. Napheesa Collier and Breanna Stewart, two of the most respected names in women's basketball, are leading the players' union into contract negotiations with the WNBA. They're demanding higher salaries. They're threatening to sit out an entire season if those demands aren't met. And simultaneously, they're running Unrivaled, a direct competitor, a separate league, a business literally designed to offer players an alternative to the organization they're negotiating with. Let that conflict of interest sink in for a moment. Imagine walking into a salary negotiation with your employer while you're actively building a company to steal their clients. Imagine demanding raises from a business you're trying to bankrupt. Imagine sitting across the table from people whose jobs depend on the league surviving, while your side project depends on it failing. This isn't just awkward. This is structural sabotage wrapped in union representation. And the timing couldn't be worse, because the WNBA just lost the one thing keeping it alive: Caitlin Clark's gravitational pull. When Clark was on screen, something magical happened. Ratings exploded. Arenas sold out. Social media couldn't stop talking. Merchandise flew off shelves. The economic engine roared to life in ways the WNBA had never experienced in its entire existence. But here's the problem nobody wants to admit publicly. That engine had one cylinder, one name, one player carrying an entire league on her shoulders. And without her dominating every broadcast, the numbers have collapsed back to levels so low they barely register. The embarrassing pre-Clark reality has returned with brutal honesty. The WNBA isn't just struggling. It's hemorrhaging money while being kept alive through NBA subsidies. It's a business operating in the red year after year, while the people demanding million-dollar contracts refuse to acknowledge basic financial reality. How did we get here? How did a league experiencing its biggest cultural moment in history end up on the brink of extinction just months later? The answer involves leadership decisions so baffling they almost seem intentional, conflicts of interest so obvious they border on parody, and a collision between player expectations and economic reality that no amount of goodwill can bridge. This isn't just a story about basketball. This is a story about what happens when ego replaces economics, when personal agendas hijack professional negotiations, and when the people tasked with saving something are the same ones burning it down. The collapse has already begun. And what happens next will change women's basketball forever. Let's talk about money. Not feelings, not narratives, not what we wish were true. Cult, art, financial, reality. The WNBA has been losing money every single year since its inception. Not breaking even, not running on thin margins, actively hemorrhaging millions of dollars annually while the NBA writes check after check to keep the lights on. This isn't opinion. This is publicly available financial data that nobody in these negotiations seems willing to acknowledge. And yet, despite operating a business that has never turned a profit in its entire existence, the league has increased player salaries dramatically over the past few years. Six-figure contracts are now standard for a 40-game season. Let me put that in perspective because context matters. The average WNBA salary currently sits around $70,000 to $80,000 for approximately 4 months of work. Entry-level rookies, fresh out of college, start in this range. Now ask yourself a genuine question. In what other industry does a startup operating deeply in the red offer recent college graduates $70,000 plus for 4 months of work? Tech startups? They're famous for paying in equity and promises. Entertainment? Most performers spend years earning nothing before getting stable income. Traditional sports? Minor league athletes barely survive on poverty wages. The answer is almost nowhere. The WNBA represents one of the most generous labor investments in any unprofitable business in modern history. But here's where it gets insane. The players' union isn't satisfied. Not even close. They're pushing for million-dollar contracts. Across the board. For everyone. And they're threatening to sit out the entire 2025 season if those demands aren't met. Read that again. Players in a league that has never made money are threatening to shut down operations unless they receive salaries comparable to athletes in leagues generating billions in revenue. This isn't negotiation. This is financial fantasy dressed up as labor rights. And the market has already delivered its verdict with brutal clarity. Television ratings outside of Caitlin Clark games have plummeted to embarrassing levels. Viewership numbers that would get most shows canceled. Attendance figures that reveal empty seats and manufactured enthusiasm. The gap between what players believe they deserve and what the market is willing to pay grows wider every single day. But nobody wants to say it out loud. Because saying it out loud means acknowledging uncomfortable truths. It means admitting that popularity on social media doesn't automatically translate to profitable business models. It means accepting that cultural significance and economic viability are two completely different things. The players want NBA-level compensation. The business generates local car dealership revenue. Something has to give. And the people who should be solving this problem? The union representatives who should be navigating these treacherous financial waters with wisdom and strategy? They're too busy building the lifeboat they'll escape on when the ship goes down. Which brings us to a press conference that revealed everything. A press conference changed everything. Not because of what was announced, but because of what was revealed. Napheesa Collier, All-Star, MVP candidate, and lead negotiator for the Players Union, stood in front of cameras during one of the most critical moments in WNBA history. Labor negotiations were reaching a breaking point. The league's survival hung in the balance. Every word mattered, and she chose to publicly undermine the commissioner. Her target? Cathy Engelbert, the woman tasked with keeping the entire operation from collapsing. Collier's complaint? Engelbert doesn't personally reach out to players after injuries or accomplishments. She doesn't send congratulatory text messages. She doesn't check in with that personal touch. Unlike her husband. You read that correctly. In the middle of contentious negotiations that will determine whether the WNBA exists in 2027, the union's primary spokesperson praised her husband's people skills, while criticizing the commissioner trying to keep everyone employed. Her husband, who runs Unrivaled, the competing league. The conflict of interest isn't even hidden anymore. It's being broadcast on national television with a smile. But let's examine what Collier actually said. Because buried in her criticism is a fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership actually means at this level. Sending congratulatory text is nice. Swarm. It's the kind of thing that makes people feel appreciated in the moment. But it's not leadership. Leadership means making impossible financial decisions when there's no good option. Leadership means balancing 30 different stakeholder interests who all want conflicting things. Leadership means negotiating television contracts that actually generate revenue instead of just goodwill. Leadership means building sustainable business models that don't require daddy, the NBA, to bail you out every single year. And sometimes, leadership means delivering uncomfortable truths. Truths like, your popularity doesn't automatically translate to profit. Truths like, your feelings don't override financial statements. Truths like, running a professional sports league requires more than good intentions, inspirational Instagram posts, and expecting billionaires to subsidize your salary because you believe you deserve it. Cathy Engelbert isn't perfect. No executive is. But her job isn't to be everyone's friend. Her job is to keep the league alive long enough for these players to have careers. And right now, she's fighting a war on two fronts. On one side, a media environment that rewards emotional narratives over business reality. On the other side, union leaders who are actively building the escape hatch they'll use when negotiations fail. What message does Collier's criticism actually send? It tells Engelbert that no matter what she does financially, she'll be attacked personally. It tells the public that the players prioritize feeling valued over being employed. It tells potential investors that this league's labor force doesn't understand how business works. And it tells everyone watching exactly whose interests are really being served in these negotiations. Hint, it's not the average WNBA player making $70,000. Because while Collier and Stewart build their alternative empire, the players who can't get unrivaled contracts will be left with nothing when the WNBA folds. But there's another name we need to discuss. The elephant in every room. Caitlin Clark broke women's basketball. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but completely. She exposed a truth so uncomfortable that an entire league, an entire media ecosystem, and an entire generation of players have been scrambling to avoid admitting it out loud. The WNBA's value was always theoretical, until Clark made it measurable. When she stepped onto a professional court, something unprecedented happened. Television ratings didn't just increase, they exploded. Her games drew viewership numbers the league had never seen in its nearly 3-decade existence. Arenas that had grown accustomed to empty sections suddenly sold out. Merchandise that gathered dust started flying off shelves. Social media engagement skyrocketed to levels that made the WNBA trend alongside the biggest stories in sports. The economic impact wasn't gradual. It was immediate, dramatic, undeniable. Corporate sponsors who had politely declined WNBA partnerships suddenly wanted in. Television networks that treated women's basketball as an afterthought began scheduling prime slots. The money followed the attention exactly as it always does. For one beautiful electric season, it seemed like women's basketball had finally arrived. But here's what the celebration obscured. None of it was replicable without her. The moment Caitlin Clark wasn't on screen, something devastating happened. The ratings collapsed. Not declined, collapsed. Back to pre-Clark levels that barely registered as a blip on the sports radar. Games featuring other stars drew fractions of her viewership. Marquee matchups that should have captivated audiences instead played to digital silence. The buzz evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. And this revealed the WNBA's fundamental structural problem. The league doesn't have a product issue. It has a star distribution issue. In successful sports leagues, star power gets distributed. Multiple teams have must-watch players. Different markets generate their own excitement. The brand becomes bigger than any individual. The NFL doesn't collapse when one quarterback retires. The NBA survives when superstars switch teams. The infrastructure supports interest beyond individual magnetism. The WNBA has never built that infrastructure. For years, the league has operated on a model of hope. Hope that attention would come. Hope that cultural shifts would generate viewership. Hope that investment today would pay off tomorrow. Caitlin Clark arrived like a lightning bolt, and instead of using that electricity to power long-term growth, the league watched it illuminate exactly how dark things were without her. The other stars felt this, and they didn't react well. Instead of studying what made Clark magnetic, some chose resentment. Instead of elevating their own brands to match her gravitational pull, they complained about her coverage. Instead of recognizing an opportunity, they saw a threat. The media played its part too. Narratives about rookie treatment dominated coverage. Stories about jealousy and locker room tension overshadowed the basketball itself. The controversy became bigger than the competition, and viewers noticed. Casual fans who tuned in for Clark encountered hostility, pettiness, and an unwelcoming atmosphere. Many never came back. The very audience the WNBA desperately needed was pushed away by the people who needed them most. But the real question isn't what went wrong. The real question is, was this accidental? Or was someone making decisions designed to ensure this outcome? Let's play a game. It's called accident or strategy. Because when you line up everything that's happened to the WNBA over the past 18 months, a pattern emerges. A pattern so consistent, so perfectly designed to weaken the league, that calling it coincidence requires ignoring basic logic. Start with the timing. Unrivaled was announced right as WNBA contract negotiations began heating up. Not a year before. Not after the dust settled. Right in the middle of maximum leverage. Coincidence? Now look at who's running Unrivaled. Not random investors. Not outside entrepreneurs. The exact same players leading union negotiations with the WNBA. Napheesa, Collier. Breanna, Stewart. Names that carry weight. Voices that command attention. Leaders whose words shape how every other player perceives these negotiations. They're simultaneously asking the WNBA for more money while building the escape route for when the WNBA says no. Coincidence? Consider the press strategy. Every time the WNBA makes financial reality clear, we can't afford these demands. The narrative shifts to emotional attacks. Leadership is cold. The commissioner doesn't care. Players aren't valued. The conversation moves from spreadsheets to feelings, from economics to outrage. And who benefits from that shift? Not the league trying to survive. Not the fans hoping for resolution. Not even the average player just trying to earn a living. The people who benefit are those with somewhere else to go when the WNBA crumbles. Coincidence? Here's what nobody is saying out loud. Unrivaled doesn't need the WNBA to fail completely. It just needs the WNBA to fail enough. Enough that top players feel justified leaving. Enough that public sympathy sides with athletes over executives. Enough that when Collier and Stewart walk away from negotiations, they look like freedom fighters instead of saboteurs. The playbook is elegant in its simplicity. Step 1. Make impossible demands. Ask for salaries the business cannot sustain. Frame those demands as justice. Step 2. Attack leadership personally. Make the commissioner a villain. Shift focus from financial reality to emotional grievance. Step 3. Build the alternative. Create Unrivaled as the player-friendly option. Position it as what women's basketball should have always been. Step 4. Watch it burn. When negotiations collapse, blame the league. When players strike, cite greed. Theirs, not yours. When the WNBA folds, absorb its talent into your waiting arms. Step 5. Profit. This isn't a conspiracy theory. Every single piece of this is happening in public view. The only thing missing is someone pointing at the pattern and calling it what it is. Strategic demolition dressed as labor negotiation. And the cruelest part? The players being used as pawns have no idea. The mid-tier athletes following their union leaders into battle don't have unrivaled contracts waiting. They don't have overseas options paying premium rates. They don't have husband-run leagues ready to catch them. When the WNBA collapses, Collier and Stewart land softly in the empire they built. Everyone else hits concrete. But there's something even more sinister happening beneath the surface. Something that explains why the league's response has been so weak, so ineffective, so almost deliberately inadequate. Why isn't the WNBA fighting back? This is the question that haunts everyone paying attention. A question with answers so uncomfortable that most analysts won't touch it. The league is being dismantled piece by piece. The conflict of interest is obvious. The strategy is visible. And yet the response from WNBA leadership has been polite, measured, almost passive. Cathy Engelbert releases carefully worded statements. Ownership groups stay silent. The NBA, which subsidizes everything, watches from the shadows without intervening. What? There are 3 possible explanations, and none of them are good. Possibility 1. Incompetence. Maybe WNBA leadership genuinely doesn't understand what's happening. Maybe they're so focused on traditional labor negotiation playbooks that they can't see the unconventional warfare being waged against them. This would explain the weak press responses, the failure to highlight conflicts of interest, the refusal to make the financial situation crystal clear to fans who might support them. But here's the problem with the incompetence theory. These are not stupid people. Cathy Engelbert was the CEO of Deloitte, one of the largest professional services firms on earth. She managed billions. She navigated corporate warfare at the highest levels. She knows what a hostile takeover looks like. So if it's not incompetence, what is it? Possibility 2. Paralysis. The WNBA exists in a unique cultural position. It's not just a sports league. It's a symbol. A representation of progress, equality, and women's advancement in professional athletics. Attacking the players' union, even when that union is acting in bad faith, carries enormous risk. The optics are terrible. The narrative writes itself. Rich executives crushing athlete dreams. So leadership stays quiet. They absorb attacks without responding. They let Collier undermine the commissioner without pushback. They watch Unrivaled grow without public objection. Because fighting back means becoming the villain in a story the media has already written. This theory holds more water. But it still doesn't explain everything. Possibility 3. The quiet exit. This is the one nobody wants to discuss. What if certain people within WNBA leadership have already decided the league isn't worth saving? What if the NBA, tired of writing subsidy checks, has privately signaled that support has limits? What if the best outcome, for investors, for owners, for everyone except players and fans, is a controlled collapse rather than an endless financial drain? Think about it. If the WNBA folds during a player strike, who takes the blame? The players, the union, the unreasonable demands. Not ownership, not the league office, not the NBA. The narrative becomes, we tried everything. The players destroyed it themselves. Assets get liquidated, losses get written off, and everyone in the executive suite walks away clean while players explain to their families why the paycheck stopped. Is this happening? I don't know. Nobody outside those boardrooms knows. But the WNBA's passive response to active sabotage only makes sense if someone has already decided the ship is going down, and they're arranging deck chairs instead of patching holes. Meanwhile, there's one person who could change everything. One player with enough power to shift the entire conversation. And she's been strategically silent. Caitlin Clark hasn't said a word. Not about the union demands. Not about Unrivaled. Not about the negotiations threatening to cancel the season she's supposed to dominate. And her silence is deafening. Think about the power this woman holds. Not political power. Not executive power. Something more valuable in modern sports. Attention power. When Caitlin Clark speaks, the sports world stops to listen. When she plays, ratings multiply. When her name trends, Casual fans who couldn't name another WNBA player suddenly care about women's basketball. She is the most valuable asset this league has ever possessed. And right now, that asset is sitting on the sidelines while her future burns. What? There are layers to this silence. And each layer reveals something important about the impossible position she's been placed in. Layer 1, the rookie trap. Clark is still technically new. She's accomplished more in one season than most players achieve in careers, but the hierarchy of professional sports doesn't bend for statistics. Speaking out against veteran leadership, against Collier, against Stewart, against union decisions, would violate unwritten rules that govern locker room politics. It would make her a target. Again. She already spent her rookie year navigating hostility that ranged from subtle to blatant. Hard fouls that crossed lines. Media narratives questioning whether she deserved her attention. A constant undercurrent of resentment from players who'd spent years building something she seemingly inherited overnight. Speaking now means reopening those wounds. Confirming suspicions that she sees herself as above the collective. Giving ammunition to critics who've waited for reasons to hate her. Layer 2, the brand calculation. Caitlin Clark's commercial value extends far beyond basketball. Endorsement deals, media opportunities, a future that could include broadcasting, ownership, or ventures we haven't imagined yet. That value depends on likability, on being seen as a team player, on avoiding controversy that might alienate potential partners. Taking sides in an ugly labor dispute risks everything she's built, even if she's right, even if her position is perfectly reasonable. The modern media environment punishes nuance and rewards outrage. One wrong sentence becomes a career-defining headline. Layer 3, the impossible math. Here's what makes Clark's situation truly unfair. She's being asked to save a league that never fully embraced her. To use her platform defending an organization whose own players sometimes resented her existence. To sacrifice her carefully maintained neutrality for people who might not do the same for her. Why should she fight for the WNBA's survival when the WNBA never quite fought for her? The veterans demanding million-dollar contracts? Some of them made her rookie season harder than it needed to be. The union leadership threatening strikes? They've never publicly acknowledged that her presence tripled their leverage. Caitlin Clark owes the WNBA nothing, and everyone knows it. But here's the devastating truth. If she stays silent, the league may collapse. If she speaks up, she risks everything she's built. There is no winning move. Unless she's already made a decision nobody sees coming. Unless her silence isn't indecision, it's strategy. What if Caitlin Clark is waiting for something specific? What if she knows something we don't? What does Caitlin Clark know? This question has been circulating in closed circles, whispered among agents, discussed in private conversations between executives who've built careers reading between lines. Because her silence doesn't match her personality. This is an athlete who competed with visible fire since high school, who responded to doubters with performance, who never shied from big moments or difficult conversations. Quiet calculation isn't her brand, unless the calculation is bigger than anyone realizes. Let's consider what Clark might be seeing that we're missing. She has access to information casual observers don't. Conversations with her agent, one of the most powerful in sports. Meetings with sponsors who've invested millions in her future. Relationships with media executives who understand where basketball is heading. What if those conversations have revealed something? Scenario 1. The NBA is preparing to intervene. The NBA has subsidized the WNBA for decades. Billions of dollars keeping a struggling league alive through patience that defies normal business logic. But patience has limits. Adam Silver has navigated the NBA through multiple crises. He understands brand management. He understands when subsidiaries become liabilities rather than assets. What if Clark knows the NBA is preparing direct intervention? A restructuring that bypasses current leadership entirely. A reset that changes ownership structures, revenue models, and maybe even which players hold power. If that intervention is coming, staying silent makes perfect sense. Why take sides in a war that's about to become irrelevant? Scenario 2. A competing offer exists. Unrivaled wants the WNBA's best players. But what if someone else wants the best player? International leagues have grown dramatically. European basketball offers professional environments that rival American infrastructure. Saudi Arabia and other wealthy nations have expressed interest in building women's sports programs. What if Clark has received an offer so significant that WNBA survival becomes personally irrelevant? An offer that makes her current contract look like pocket change. An offer that includes ownership stakes, media deals, and long-term security the WNBA could never match. If that offer exists, her silence becomes strategic patience. Why fight for a sinking ship when a yacht is waiting? Scenario 3. She's building her own thing. Clark has proven she understands her value better than anyone in women's basketball history. She's navigated nil deals, media appearances, and brand partnerships with sophistication beyond her years. What if she's not waiting for someone else's solution? What if she's constructing her own? A media company, a competing league, a basketball empire built on the only brand that's proven it can generate real revenue, her own. This scenario sounds dramatic, but consider the precedent. LeBron James built a media empire while still playing. Tom Brady launched businesses that extended far beyond football. Athletes at Clark's level think generationally, not seasonally. What if Caitlin Clark is already 3 moves ahead? Here's what we know for certain. Her silence isn't accidental. Her team isn't passive. Every day that passes without a public statement is a strategic choice made by people who understand exactly what's at stake. The question isn't whether Clark has a plan. The question is whether that plan includes the WNBA at all. And if it doesn't, who else is already positioning for what comes next? The vultures are circling. Not publicly. Not yet. But behind closed doors, powerful entities are watching the WNBA implode with intense interest. Not interest in saving it. Interest in picking apart the carcass. Because when professional leagues collapse, valuable pieces remain. Television contracts, team brands built over decades, arena relationships, fan databases, media archives, intellectual property. Someone will own those pieces. The only question is who. Let's identify the players positioning themselves. First, private equity. Sports investment has exploded over the past decade. Firms that once ignored athletics now compete aggressively for ownership stakes. The valuations have become absurd, billions for franchises that seemed worthless 20 years ago. These investors don't think emotionally. They don't care about legacy. They calculate returns on investment with cold precision. A collapsed WNBA offers opportunity. Distressed assets sell cheap. Desperate sellers accept unfavorable terms. And buyers who wait patiently can acquire infrastructure that took decades to build for pennies on the dollar. Several major firms have quietly explored women's basketball investments. They've run projections. They've identified which franchises hold real value versus which are dead weight. When the collapse accelerates, they'll be ready. Second, media conglomerates. ESPN, Amazon, Netflix, Apple. The streaming wars have transformed sports broadcasting into a battlefield. Every platform needs exclusive content. Every network wants properties that drive subscriptions. Women's basketball has proven it can generate attention. The Clark phenomenon demonstrated ceiling potential that surprised even optimistic observers. But current WNBA contracts limit exploitation of that potential. Existing deals were signed before anyone understood what Caitlin Clark meant for viewership. The terms favor networks over league. A collapse resets everything. New ownership could negotiate fresh agreements reflecting current market realities. Media companies could acquire direct stakes rather than licensing content. The entire relationship between women's basketball and broadcasting could transform. Some executives might actually prefer collapse to continuation. Third, Unrivaled itself. This is the obvious one, but the implications deserve examination. If the WNBA folds, where do players go? Unrivaled can't immediately absorb an entire league's worth of talent. The infrastructure doesn't exist. The funding isn't sufficient. The business model assumes coexistence, not replacement. But selective absorption? That's different. Collier and Stewart don't need every WNBA player. They need the marketable ones. The stars. The names that generate interest. Everyone else becomes expendable. A WNBA collapse would create a buyer's market for talent. Desperate players would accept whatever terms Unrivaled offered. Salary expectations would reset downward because alternatives disappeared. The very players following union leadership into this confrontation would discover their leaders secured lifeboats, while everyone else drowned. Fourth, international leagues. European basketball has matured significantly. Asian markets have grown. Middle Eastern nations are investing billions in sports diversification. A WNBA collapse creates immediate opportunity for leagues previously considered inferior. American players who once viewed international contracts as fallback options suddenly face them as primary employment. The talent dispersal would reshape global women's basketball permanently. and leagues positioned to receive that talent would strengthen dramatically. The vultures aren't hoping for collapse. They're planning for it. But there's one more entity watching. One more player whose involvement could change everything. An entity with resources beyond any private investor. With motivations beyond profit. With reasons to care about women's basketball that transcend quarterly returns. And they've been suspiciously quiet. The NBA has a decision to make. Not eventually. Not next year. Right now. For 28 years, the NBA has subsidized the WNBA with patience that defies business logic. Hundreds of millions of dollars invested in a property that has never returned profit. Annual losses absorbed without public complaint. Continuous support despite ratings that barely registered. Why? The official answer involves commitment to women's sports. Social responsibility. Long-term investment in basketball's growth across all demographics. The real answer is more complicated. The WNBA has served as a brand enhancement tool. A shield against criticism. Proof that the NBA cares about more than just profit. Every time questions arose about player treatment, about league ethics, about billionaire owners exploiting athletes, the WNBA existed as counterargument. Look what we're building. Look what we're supporting. Look how much we care. That shield has protected the NBA through countless controversies. Its value cannot be calculated on spreadsheets. But shields only work when they don't become liabilities. Right now, the WNBA situation is evolving from asset to embarrassment. Union leaders building competing leagues. Public conflicts that generate negative headlines. Labor disputes threatening to cancel seasons. Adam Silver, the most politically savvy commissioner in professional sports, is watching this unfold. And he's calculating. What serves the NBA's interests? Option 1. Massive intervention. The NBA could inject unprecedented capital into the WNBA. Reset ownership structures. Fire leadership. Bring in new executives with mandates to stabilize operations regardless of political consequences. This approach would signal permanent commitment. It would silence critics who've always questioned whether NBA support was genuine. It would potentially save the league. But it would also mean owning the controversy. Every negative headline about player disputes becomes an NBA headline. Every union conflict becomes Adam Silver's problem. Every failure reflects on the parent organization. Option 2. Strategic distance. The NBA could slowly reduce support while maintaining public statements of commitment. Let market forces determine outcomes. Allow the WNBA to rise or fall on its own merits. This approach provides deniability. If the league collapses, the NBA can express disappointment without accepting blame. The narrative becomes, "We tried, but external factors proved insurmountable." Financially, this makes sense. Reputationally, it carries risk. But calculated risk that might be acceptable. Option 3. Controlled demolition. This is the option nobody discusses publicly. The option that might already be underway. What if the NBA has concluded that the current WNBA structure cannot be saved? What if internal analysis suggests that no amount of investment will generate sustainable returns? In that scenario, the smartest play isn't rescue. It's managed decline. Let the players' union make impossible demands. Let Unrivaled create alternative pathways. Let public sentiment shift toward blaming athletes rather than ownership. When collapse comes, the NBA absorbs valuable pieces. Television relationships. Franchise locations with actual potential. The 2 or 3 teams that demonstrated viability. Everything else disappears. And from the ashes, something new emerges. Something rebuilt without legacy contracts, without antagonistic union leadership, without the baggage of 3 decades of failed business models. A fresh start, designed from scratch, with lessons learned from everything that went wrong. Which option is the NBA pursuing? Nobody outside the innermost circles knows for certain. But here's what we can observe. The NBA hasn't defended Kathy Engelbert publicly, hasn't challenged the union's narrative, hasn't highlighted the obvious conflicts of interest, hasn't done anything that might slow the WNBA's acceleration toward crisis. Silence can be support, but silence can also be permission. Permission to fail. So where does this leave us? Women's basketball stands at a crossroads more significant than any in its history. The WNBA faces existential threats from within and without. Union leadership prioritizes personal ventures over collective survival. The league's greatest asset maintains strategic silence. And the parent organization that could save everything seems content to watch. The collapse hasn't finished, but it has begun. What happens next depends on decisions being made right now. In boardrooms we'll never enter. In conversations we'll never hear. By people whose motivations we can only guess. One thing is certain. Women's basketball will survive this. The talent is too deep. The interest is too real. The potential is too obvious. But the WNBA as we know it? That's a different question entirely. The league that pioneered professional women's basketball in America might not see 2027. And when historians examine what went wrong, they'll find a story of leadership decisions so catastrophic they seemed almost intentional. Ego over economics. Personal interest over collective survival. Short-term leverage over long-term sustainability. The WNBA didn't collapse because of external forces. It collapsed because the people inside the building decided burning it down served their purposes better than renovation. And nobody with power to stop them chose to intervene. That's not tragedy. That's choice. The question remaining, whose choice will determine what rises from the ashes? We'll find out soon enough.